They didn't lower their voices when they cut me down. My own blood, the people who had feasted off my silence for years, called me a parasite in front of everyone. Laughter rippled at my expense, and not a single hand reached out to stop it. In that moment, something inside me broke clean apart. My name is Dorinda Blake, and this is the day I learned what family really meant. The ballroom shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers, a place designed to impress. Silver cutlery gleamed on linen-draped tables, and laughter floated through the air as glasses clinked in celebration. The crowd, a mix of relatives and familiar faces from the community, leaned in closer the moment I stepped through the entrance. My heels clicked against the marble floor, steady but deliberate. Eyes turned. Some smiled politely. Others whispered behind manicured hands. I adjusted the strap of my dress and prepared myself for the usual cold distance. But nothing braced me for the words that came next. From across the room, my father's voice rang out, sharp and cutting. "Why are you here? Don't make yourself a distraction." His tone carried easily, slicing through the murmur of conversation, leaving silence in its wake. Dozens of eyes swung in my direction, weighing me, judging me. My mother's gaze slipped away as if I were invisible, her face tilted toward a cousin eager for her attention. Beside her, Victor lifted the corner of his mouth into that smirk I knew too well, the same one he'd worn since childhood, whenever he thought he had the upper hand. A ripple of whispers spread through the guests. I caught fragments: pity, disdain, amusement, all tangled together, like vultures circling. The security guard at the doorway shifted uncomfortably, hovering close as if waiting for a cue, but unwilling to act. I reached for a glass of wine from a passing tray. The stem trembled faintly in my fingers, yet my shoulders stayed square, my chin unbowed. I scanned the faces one last time, every dismissive glance, every smile at my expense, then turned and walked out, heels striking the marble with measured defiance. In that moment, silence became my armor. The humiliation cut deep, but I carried it with a straight spine. They believed they had erased me. They had no idea what was coming. The apartment was still when I returned. A silence so complete it pressed against my ears after the chaos of that ballroom. I set my clutch down, slipped off my heels, and crossed to the steel safe hidden in the corner. My hands didn't hesitate. The code was muscle memory. The lock clicked open, and I pulled out the heavy binder I had named years ago, my fallback dossier. I spread it across the glass table, each page a history carved in numbers, stacks of contracts, receipts, and wire confirmations spilled into the light. $45,000 to erase my father's credit card debt before a bank could repossess his car. $120,000 to cover my sister's tuition at the private graduate program she bragged about, as if she'd won a scholarship. $85,000 wired into Victor's restaurant venture that folded in under a year, though he still boasted of being an entrepreneur. Line after line, each payment traced back to my company. Every signature bore my name, yet every public story credited my parents' hard work and sacrifices. They paraded my silence as proof of their generosity while I carried their secrets in ledgers. I paused over tonight's expense sheet. The banquet hall, the imported flowers, the string quartet, the glossy menus embossed with gold lettering, all of it, down to the last glass of champagne, had cleared through my account. They had no idea. I closed the binder slowly, the weight of those pages pressing into my palms. What they dismissed as obligation, I had always known was debt. And tonight, those debts had just been called due. The warm light of the living room pooled across the wooden table as I opened the dossier again, laying contracts flat, smoothing creases with deliberate fingers. My eyes caught on one document I had never forgotten. Victor's personal loan agreement, $150,000, his signature scrawled across the bottom, still enforceable, still mine to call in whenever I chose. Tucked in the folder's side pocket was a note I had written to myself 3 years earlier. The ink faded, but the words sharp. If they treat me like a wallet, I will act like a bank. I leaned back, letting the sentence settle. This wasn't rage born tonight. It was preparation, years in the making. Then my phone chimed, a new email. I opened it and stared as the subject line lit up the screen. Service cancellations confirmed. One by one. The messages listed the fallout. Hotel ballroom reservation rescinded. Catering revoked. Luxury suites released. Cape Cod villa booking terminated. The celebration was collapsing in real time. Guests were still raising glasses, unaware the floor had already been pulled from beneath them. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding and closed the folder with a soft thud. The house was quiet, but in that quiet, power shifted. For once, the silence didn't crush me. It belonged to me. Night had settled heavy over the city when pounding rattled my front door. Shadows shifted across the frosted glass, and Victor's voice rose above the noise, harsh and desperate. I unlatched the chain but didn't open it. Through the narrow pane I saw him, shirt wrinkled, collar damp with sweat, a crumpled contract trembling in his hand. My father loomed just behind, jaw clenched, while my mother's cries carried down the hallway, loud enough for neighbors to hear. "Open up!" Victor barked. "You have to fix this. The hotel says everything's canceled. They're threatening to sue." My father shoved a bill at the glass, his voice low but sharp. "This is your duty. You can't walk away from your family." Duty. That word, so casually used to disguise exploitation, cut deeper than any insult. My mother's wails followed, echoing with guilt rather than apology. "If you let this stand, our reputation will be ruined." I opened the door only far enough to let them see what I held. The folder snapped open in my hands, pages neatly stacked, signatures lined in ink. I tapped the cancellation form, my name clear at the bottom. "You keep calling it obligation. I call it choice, and the choice is mine." I stopped it. The silence that fell was heavier than their pounding. For once, they had nothing left to demand. Morning light streamed across my desk when the email arrived. The sender's name froze me in place. Martin, the accountant who had quietly handled my parents' filings for years. His message was brief, but the weight of it sank like stone. He wrote of the Cape Cod villa, the so-called heirloom my parents boasted about at every gathering. "They've listed it as inherited property," he explained. "But I can find no supporting documents. The mortgage and payments trace back to an account under your company." I scrolled again, heart pounding as I absorbed the next lines. Discrepancies, undeclared transfers, and the subtle suggestion that federal auditors would not overlook what he had uncovered. They hadn't just leaned on me. They had built their empire of lies on my name. What I once thought was ungratefulness was far darker. Fraud wrapped in the costume of family pride. I printed the email, slid it into my dossier, and pressed the folder shut. My reflection caught in the glass frame beside me, steadier than I felt, yet resolute. Under my breath, I spoke to the silence of the room. "This isn't family anymore. This is the law." The elevator doors opened onto the top floor, and I stepped into a world of quiet authority. Eleanor's office was lined with dark wood shelves and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city's skyline. The atmosphere was cool, precise, and without distraction, exactly like the woman who rose to greet me. I laid the thick dossier on her polished desk. She opened it with calm efficiency, scanning page after page, her pen leaving streaks of red across the margins. When she reached the Cape Cod villa statements, she pressed harder, highlighting the monthly transfers from my company. "This isn't family bookkeeping," she said finally. "This is asset misuse. And the way they filed it, we're also staring at tax fraud." The words landed with the weight of inevitability. She slid a form across to me, an order to freeze any property or funds linked to my name. I picked up the pen. My signature flowed without hesitation, the act more liberating than I expected. Later that evening, a courier delivered a letter. Inside, a neatly typed offer promised a payout of $100,000 if I would sign a non-disclosure agreement. A bribe? wrapped in civility. My phone rang minutes later. My mother's voice spilled out, trembling with tears. "If you go through with this, we'll be humiliated. Think of your father. Don't drag us through the mud." I held the phone away for a beat, staring at the skyline beyond the glass. When I finally answered, my voice was flat. "I don't want your money. I want the truth." I ended the call. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like their captive. It started with a vibration on my phone, then another, and another, until the notifications blurred together. I opened Instagram, and there it was. Victor's post. A photo of the banquet hall abandoned mid-celebration. Half-empty tables. Flowers wilting under cold lights. His caption was venom dressed as righteousness. "Some people will destroy their family for money." The reaction was swift. Relatives piled into the comments, condemning me. A group chat lit up with furious messages. My name threaded with words like traitor and shame. Screenshots arrived from people I hadn't spoken to in years, each one carrying another blow. Even friends I trusted faltered. A message from a college friend blinked across my screen. "I didn't think you were capable of this. I'm disappointed." The weight of those words stung, but I refused to let them see me break. Then my sister sent a single, cutting text. "If you keep pushing, we're no longer family." My father never called. Instead, he forwarded an invoice from a new law firm, an unspoken threat of countersuit. Their tactics were predictable. Smear me publicly, corner me privately, bury me legally. I closed my eyes, letting the noise crash around me, then opened a file I hadn't touched in years. A recording clicked to life. Victor's voice spilling into the room. "You have to put it under your company. Investors only trust your name. Without you, it won't work." I listened twice, then shut the file. A slow smile formed, sharp with certainty. "Let them brand me a traitor," I whispered to the quiet. "The courtroom won't listen to gossip. It will listen to proof." The courthouse buzzed with a restless energy, its marble halls packed with strangers who had come to witness a spectacle. Reporters clustered near the entrance, cameras flashing whenever a familiar name passed by. Inside the courtroom, every seat was filled, and the murmur of voices died down only when the bailiff called the session to order. I sat beside Eleanor, her presence steady and unshakable. She flipped through our binders with calm precision, her pen poised like a weapon ready to strike. Across the aisle, my parents entered with slumped shoulders, dressed in muted suits that no longer radiated the power they once claimed. Victor trailed behind them, pale and gaunt, his eyes fixed on the floor. Their attorney, a man with a polished tie and rehearsed confidence, carried their defense like a shield already dented. When the judge nodded for Eleanor to begin, the room dimmed as the projector clicked on. Slide by slide, the numbers illuminated the truth. Transactions from my company flowed across the screen. The six-figure sum for the hotel ballroom, the monthly payments on the Cape Cod villa, even the restoration costs for my father's vintage car. Each figure was irrefutable, each transfer undeniable. My mother shot to her feet, her voice shrill enough to pierce the silence. "Ungrateful daughter, you are destroying your own parents in front of the world!" Gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge raised a hand for order, but her words had already branded the air with venom. Victor didn't move. His head hung low, his hands clasped in his lap, as though he could disappear if he made himself small enough. Their lawyer scrambled to recover, his voice tight. These were informal arrangements within a family. Funds were never misappropriated. They were intended to be returned. The excuse rang hollow, but he clung to it desperately. I rose slowly, the weight of the room pressing on my shoulders, but my voice cut through with clarity. "This is not about repayment. This is about recognition. I don't want their money. I want the truth on paper." A hush swept through the chamber. Even the shuffling of reporters ceased. The judge studied me for a long moment, then turned to the documents projected in vivid detail. Her gavel came down with a sharp crack. "The property known as the Cape Cod Villa is hereby transferred solely to the ownership of the plaintiff. The family trust is to be replenished in full. The defendants are stripped of any further financial control. The words echoed, final and irrevocable. I exhaled, steady and unbroken. The ledger that had chained me for years had finally been balanced. Not in whispers behind closed doors, but in the full light of the law. Weeks slipped by after the gavel struck, but the echoes of that courtroom still carried into every corner of my life. The local papers ran the story on their front pages. Blake family under fire for financial misconduct. Copies landed on doorsteps across Boston. Each headline another nail in the coffin of their carefully curated reputation. I didn't have to wonder what the community thought. The looks said enough. Neighbors who once waved with eager smiles now glanced away when I passed. At the Sunday market, whispers trailed behind me, their pity clashing with schadenfreude. But it wasn't my name they spat with venom. It was theirs. My parents had always lived for appearances, and now those appearances had shattered like cheap glass. The church pews where my father once sat with his chin lifted in pride now felt empty, though he still attended. The silence around him was deafening. The same people he'd boasted to for years now avoided his eye, unwilling to sit too close to a man stripped of his illusion of wealth. My mother bore it worse. She thrived on being admired, and now she withered under the weight of gossip. Her friends from book clubs stopped calling. Invitations vanished. Even her forced smiles couldn't mask the cracks. My phone buzzed constantly with their desperation. Messages piled up like unpaid bills. My mother's pleas were laced with hysteria. If you keep pushing, we'll be destroyed. Please, Dorinda, don't ruin the family. She didn't mention lies or fraud, only ruin, her ruin. Then came my sister's bitter condemnation. You've broken us. You've turned us into a spectacle. Was that your plan all along? Her words dripped with blame, but none carried even a shred of responsibility. Victor, at least, didn't dress his silence with theatrics. After days of nothing, he sent a single envelope. Inside was an old invoice with 3 words scrawled across it in his hurried handwriting. I'll pay back. Not an apology. Not an admission. Just a promise written on paper that felt more hollow than all his past IOUs. I sat with the messages spread out before me, the weight of them pressing like stones on my chest. Yet beneath that weight, a truth crystallized. Not one of them had offered remorse. Not one had said, I'm sorry for what we did to you. Every plea, every accusation, every scrap of silence was rooted in fear of exposure, not in love. I placed the phone face down on the table and let the silence settle around me. For the first time, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt clean, final. The family they claimed I was destroying had already rotted from within. I hadn't broken it. I had only stripped away the mask they forced me to wear. The Blake name wasn't mine to salvage anymore, and I no longer cared to try. The light of late autumn slanted through my apartment window, warm and golden, softening the edges of the room. On the table lay an envelope, its corners bent, my name scrawled across it in handwriting I would have recognized anywhere. I slid a finger under the seal and unfolded the single page inside. The words were crooked, hurried, the ink uneven. This is the moment the family fell apart. Victor's hand, always careless, always rushed. I stared at the line, waiting for something more, an apology, a plea, a shred of acknowledgement. Nothing. Just a declaration of collapse, as if the burden belonged to me. A laugh rose in my throat, quiet and bitter. Then I folded the paper, fed it into the shredder, and listened to the steady grind until nothing remained but strips of white curling into the bin. The sound was final, like the door closing on a room I would never re-enter. Days later, I signed the final documents to sell the Cape Cod villa. What had once been their crown jewel was now a resource for something far greater. The wire transfer cleared into an account marked with a name that finally felt like mine. Parker Foundation. The seed of something new, a scholarship for women stepping back into education after years of being told it was too late. The dedication ceremony was small, intimate. I stood beneath the fresh sign fixed above the door. Parker Foundation, the letters gleaming in the afternoon light. A young woman approached, clutching her backpack straps as if they anchored her. She smiled nervously before whispering, "Thank you. This will change everything for me." I touched her shoulder lightly, meeting her gaze. "Live for yourself," I said. "No one else." As she walked away, I breathed in the crisp air, the weight on my chest lifting. The family I'd been accused of destroying had only ever been a fragile illusion, held together by my money and my silence. It wasn't me who shattered it. It was the truth. And in its ashes, I finally found something they could never take from me. Freedom.